It was supposed to be a routine evening, but what happened next shocked everyone. Officer Brad Carter had been on the force for years, but today, his badge wouldn't protect him. When he pulled over a woman on a quiet suburban street, he had no idea she was more than just another citizen. She was a CIA agent. Injured, exhausted, and in desperate need of help, she expected the officer to do his duty. Instead, what happened left witnesses horrified. Agent Maya Reynolds had just survived a dangerous undercover mission. Bruised and limping, she flagged down a police car, hoping for assistance. But as soon as Officer Carter saw her, something changed in his eyes. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer help. Instead, his anger boiled over, and what should have been a routine check turned into something much worse. People nearby watched in disbelief as things escalated. Maya tried to explain who she was, but Carter refused to listen. He saw what he wanted to see, but he had no idea that in just 12 minutes, his entire life was about to change. Because Maya wasn't alone, and the truth was about to come out in the most shocking way possible. Maya's heart pounded as she struggled to stay on her feet. She had spent years serving her country, facing dangers most people couldn't imagine, but she never expected to be treated like this in her own homeland. She could still hear the echoes of the last mission in her mind, the gunfire, the narrow escape, the painful injuries she had barely managed to walk away from. Now instead of help, she was being shoved, yelled at, and accused of things she hadn't done. Officer Carter's grip tightened as he ignored her protests. "Stop resisting," he barked, his voice filled with authority, but Maya wasn't resisting. She was barely standing. People nearby started recording, their phones capturing every second. Whispers turned into murmurs, and soon the small crowd began to question what they were seeing. Some recognized Maya's face. A woman in the crowd gasped, realizing who she was. Meanwhile, Maya's communication device, hidden in her pocket, was still active. A call was already in progress, one that Carter had no idea about. On the other end, someone was listening, someone who had the power to change everything. And they were only minutes away. Maya winced as Carter's grip dug into her arm. Her body ached from the injuries she had sustained earlier, but she refused to show weakness. She had faced worse. What angered her more than the pain was the way he looked at her, like she didn't belong, like she wasn't worth listening to. She had identified herself twice, but he either didn't believe her or didn't care. The crowd was growing. People whispered, some raising their voices in protest. A man in a gray hoodie stepped forward, holding up his phone. "You're making a mistake," he warned. Carter shot him a sharp glare, but the man didn't back down. Others followed his lead, recording from different angles. The tension thickened, but Carter was too focused on exerting control to notice. Meanwhile, Maya's earpiece crackled to life. A familiar voice came through, firm and controlled. "Agent Reynolds' status?" Relief flooded her, but she kept her expression neutral. If Carter realized she was in contact with someone, things could escalate even further. Situation compromised, she murmured under her breath. She knew backup was on the way, but the question remained. Would they get there before things went too far? Carter yanked Maya's arm, trying to push her toward the squad car, but she planted her feet firmly. She knew she had seconds before things spiraled out of control. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, the phones recording every movement, every word. Someone shouted, "Let her go," but Carter didn't flinch. His grip tightened, his frustration boiling over. Maya felt the heat of the moment closing in around her. Her breathing was steady, but her mind was racing. Her training told her to de-escalate, but her instincts told her Carter wasn't interested in listening. He wanted power, control, and the more the crowd resisted, the more determined he became to prove he was in charge. Then the sound of screeching tires cut through the tense atmosphere. A black SUV came to a sharp stop just feet away, its doors swinging open in an instant. The crowd turned, confused and curious, as two men in dark suits stepped out. Their movements were precise, controlled, too disciplined for ordinary law enforcement. Carter hesitated for the first time, his grip loosening just slightly. Maya lifted her head, locking eyes with the man closest to her. He gave a single nod. They were here, and everything was about to change. Carter's fingers twitched as the two men stepped closer. Their sharp suits and unreadable expressions sent a ripple of uncertainty through him. He had dealt with government agents before, but something about these men felt different. The crowd had fallen silent, their phones still raised, waiting for what would happen next. One of the agents, a tall man with silver-streaked hair, reached into his jacket. Carter instinctively rested his hand on his holster, but the agent only pulled out a leather ID case. He flipped it open, revealing a badge that made Carter's stomach drop. "Agent Reynolds is one of ours," the man said evenly. "Release her. Now." Carter's jaw tightened. His eyes darted from the badge to Maya, then to the crowd. He had been in control a moment ago, but now the power was shifting fast. His mind scrambled for a way out, but before he could speak, the radio clipped to his shoulder crackled to life. "All units be advised," a dispatcher's voice came through. "Internal Affairs has issued an immediate suspension for Officer Carter. Officers en route." A stunned hush fell over the street. Carter's face drained of color. Before he could react, the second agent took a step forward and said, "You might want to think carefully about your next move." Carter's hand hovered near his holster, his mind racing. The weight of the crowd's stares, the agent's presence, and now the dispatch call had flipped everything against him. He had gone too far, and now there was no easy way out. His breaths grew shallow as he searched for an excuse, a way to explain himself, but there was none. Before he could react, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Two squad cars turned the corner, speeding toward them. The crowd parted as uniformed officers stepped out, their eyes locked on Carter. One of them, a lieutenant with a hardened expression, wasted no time. "Brad Carter, you're relieved of duty effective immediately," he announced, stepping forward. Carter's body tensed, his pride battling his survival instincts. But deep down, he knew it was over. He let go of Maya's arm, his fingers trembling slightly. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Just as the officers moved in to take him into custody, Carter turned to Maya, his voice low. "You set me up," he muttered bitterly. But Maya, standing tall despite her injuries, met his glare without fear. "No," she said firmly. "You did this to yourself." As Carter was led to the squad car, the agents turned to Maya. "We need to talk," one of them said. Maya exhaled, steadying herself. The battle wasn't over yet, because what had happened here was only the beginning of something much bigger. Maya took a deep breath as the officers shut the car door behind Carter. The flashing lights reflected off the pavement, casting long shadows as the tension in the air slowly faded. The crowd began to disperse, but the impact of what had happened lingered. People exchanged looks, some shaking their heads, others still gripping their phones, knowing this moment would not be forgotten. One of the agents stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "We need to get you checked out. You've been through enough for one day." Maya nodded, exhaustion settling into her bones, but she knew this wasn't over. What had happened here wasn't just about her. It was about something much bigger. Trust, justice, accountability. The world had seen what unfolded, and there was no erasing it now. As she was guided toward the black SUV, she glanced back one last time. Carter sat in the back of the squad car, staring straight ahead, his expression unreadable. The officer who once held all the power was now at the mercy of the system he thought he controlled. Maya turned away, exhaling slowly. Justice had been served, but deep down, she knew the fight for truth was far from over.